One of the problems with recruiting for investment banking is not the knowledge or skills you acquire, but the access to talk with real investment bankers to put your best foot forward. Our sponsor, WSO Academy, can provide those connections with 60 head mentors who are finance professionals at top firms like Goldman, Centerview, and JP Morgan. Imagine being able to get on the phone within 24 hours with one of the Academy's 1,300 mentors right before a critical interview. Get on the waitlist for WSO Academy today by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting wallstreetoasis.com/academy. All right. Welcome to Investment Banking Insights. My name is Alex Mason, and I'm your host. Thank you so much for joining me today. And the topic of the show, we're talking about investment banking. And if you listen to the intro episode, you know what this show is all about. But just as a quick reminder, we are studying the fundamental technical questions that you and I need to know in order to successfully recruit for investment banking, as well as some non-technical aspects. But this first batch of episodes is really geared toward helping you understand the groundwork, helping you understand the foundation of what investment banking is all about, and just a broad overview of how this whole thing works. Because if you're like me, you probably don't know what investment banking is all about. I mean, I didn't even know what it was a couple of years ago. And it's only in these past few months that I've really been digging deep to try to understand the industry and how to recruit successfully for it. So, the focus of this episode is just an overview of what is investment banking. Let's dig into that a little bit for a few minutes. Now, if I was to summarize it succinctly, what you're doing as an investment banker is working with businesses on capital transactions. So let's break that down. Working with businesses on capital transactions. So you're working with a business, you're not working with individuals. You're working with corporations, sometimes very large corporations, sometimes smaller corporations, and then on capital transactions. Well, what is a capital transaction? That just means that money's being exchanged for something. So you could be doing a wide variety of things. You could be buying or selling companies. That's usually the most often quoted example that's out there, which is known as mergers and acquisitions, or M&A. You could be doing other things like raising money. There's a couple of ways that a company can raise money. A company can raise money through equity, which is by selling shares of stock, or it can raise money through debt, which is by borrowing money, typically from a bank or financial institution. But there's things even beyond that in investment banking that you would help a company with doing. One of the things that isn't talked about as much, but is still an important part of the suite of advisory services that investment banks offer, is helping businesses allocate capital. So what do I mean by that? I mean that a company will come to an investment bank and say, look, I have this pile of money. What should I do with it? What should I do with it? Should I pay money to my shareholders? Should I pay dividends? Should I pay off some debt? Should I reinvest that money into the business? Investment banks can help the leadership of a company better understand what to do with their cash. So that's another aspect of investment banking advisory services. And then some analogies that I would throw around with regards to what investment bankers do. And this is from talking to investment bankers directly myself and trying to get a sense of what they're actually doing. One of the common analogies that I've heard is that investment bankers are kind of like realtors for businesses. So they'll help a company buy or sell other businesses, just like realtors help individuals buy and sell houses or real estate. So that's one analogy. Another analogy that I would like to share is that as an investment banker, in some ways, you're also a matchmaker. A business may come to you as someone who works at an investment bank and say, look, I want to acquire a business. And they may provide zero criteria about what kind of business they want. They just say, I want to buy a business. Or they may come and say, look, I want a very specific type of business I want to acquire. Here's the list of criteria. And then you go out and have to find a suitable candidate that the company can then approach in order to acquire. So that's another example. Or coming up with deal ideas and then approaching the business and saying, look, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner, I think that you should really sell your piece of this business to this other company because you would raise this amount of money and it would be a win-win on both sides. So it can go both ways. You can also kind of play that matchmaker role. Another thing that I've heard is that there's also an element of the job where you're kind of like a therapist sometimes. I mean, in some cases, you're working directly with C-suite executives, especially at the higher levels in an investment bank. You're working more directly with senior leadership at these firms. And sometimes they're worried, sometimes they're stressed, and you have to be there for them. Your job is to serve the client and meet their needs. It's very important because it's a service-based business. So if a CFO calls you at 3 in the morning and they're worried about something, you've got to be there for them and help them work through the problems, both at an intellectual level. And I would even go so far as to say, probably at an emotional level too, because you're dealing with another human being. They're working on this big transaction in many cases that could totally transform the nature of their company. And they're counting on you to be there for them, to understand the numbers in and out, and to relate to them and help them achieve their goal. So, those are some analogies that I would use to describe what investment banking actually is and what an investment banker does at a super, super, super high level. In some ways, you're a realtor for companies. In some ways, you're a matchmaker. In some ways, maybe even a little bit of a therapist. And when you blend these things together, you have someone who is working in a role that's very client focused, helping a business achieve an objective related to some kind of capital transaction. And that's basically what I understand investment banking to be. And of course, there are probably a million nuances within that, but this is the 5 minute version here, right? So that is an overview of what investment banking is. Join me on the next episode because we're going to be going into an overview of the investment banking industry. So that's what we're going to be talking about next. Thank you so much for joining me with Investment Banking Insights. My name is Alex Mason. I am your host, and I'll see you next time.